Hi, this is Tony at BesideTheFrontDoor.com. Let's plant up some seedlings today. Now I'm going to put some of these seedlings into peat pots. You do have to be very careful with peat pots because they can really suck the moisture out of your potting soil. And you don't want that. You want it to stay moist in there. So peat pots are the one thing that I would put with a solid tray underneath so I can keep just a little bit of water in there, because otherwise this dries out and it starts sucking the moisture away from the potting soil. And once that dries out your seedling, and then you have seedling death. Don't want that. One trick that you can use for that is don't leave a lip at the top of your peat pot. You want to put the potting soil to end up all the way at the top. So I'm going to start here with filling these almost all the way up. I'll put the seedlings in, and then I'll finish putting the potting soil all the way to the top. So these peat pots, as you can see, are most of the way to the top. If I had transplanted these even earlier, I could put them all the way to the top and then just push a hole in and put the seedling in there and finish it off. But I waited a little bit longer than I should have, which means that the seedling will not transplant quite as well, but plants want to live. I'm going to put a few peppers in these, a few of the tomatoes, and a few of the basil. This is what pepper seedlings look like just after they've sprouted. These have been sprouted for a few days now. You can see the seed casing right here still attached to the seed leaf, which is good, but I'm betting we're going to find a lot of root growth underneath there. Now peppers like it hot, so even when other things I pull off from the heat mat after they've sprouted, I leave the peppers on. It means that they might grow a little bit faster, so make sure the light's good. But I leave them on the heat because they like the heat. This is tomato seedlings right as they go. You can see the difference. They're very similar, the two. This is the pepper, this is the tomato. They have a thin seed leaf, but the pepper seed leaves are a bit bigger and wider, and there's a bit more of a grayer green to the tomato seedlings. And this is basil. The basil seedlings have that wide flat leaf to them. These also have sprouted a few days ago, and I expect I'm going to find a lot of roots in there, but they should be transplanted ASAP. As soon as you see those seed leaves up, if you've planted them in a grouping like this, get them out and into the pots before those roots put on much more growth. Okay, I'm going to start with some of the tomatoes. Now this is where it comes in very handy. This is where it's very important that you label your transplants, because it can be confusing until they're bigger of what is what, especially if you have more than one variety of a certain type of plant. Now, I like to take either a sharpened pencil, a pen, a chopstick. Today I'm using a screwdriver to get down in there. You go, make sure you're underneath, all the way down in there. You see how far down in I went? And just loosen that up, because you do not want to be tearing at any of those roots. This is another reason why I like to use a vermiculite, because it is so light and fluffy. I can get underneath there, and that's a good start to getting those seeds out. So once those have fluffered up, come in there and take only by the seed leaves. Do not pinch on the stem. It will damage it. But the seed leaves are going to end up coming off anyway. Now this has a lot less seeds than I had the other day on the cucumber seedling. I'll link to that video. But as you can see, that is a lot more roots than a lot of people would expect if they haven't done this before. I'm going to make a bit of a hole here, drop this down in, tuck the potting soil up around there. Now it's okay if it's a little deep, especially with tomato plants, because they're one that will grow roots all the way from the stems. And if you think about it, seeds in nature, they are down deep, and that's why they can grow so tall before they put up their true leaves, is they're waiting till they found enough light, and they keep on going until they have. So there is one. You see how it's even with the top of the peat pot? That helps keep that lip from drying out and wicking the moisture away. Remember, this pot, if this is dry, it's going to dry out your pottings on the inside. So this needs to stay moist enough that the peat pot stays wet. And look at all those roots that I have there. They're quite long and tall. I'm going to get a nice deep hole down in here. Drop it down in. Hold it a bit level with where the soil is going to end up. Tuck that down in. Put some more soil in here to level it off to the top. There's a few things you cannot do with seedlings. You cannot pinch by the sides, and if it gets pinched off, you've killed it. It's done. But if it bends over a little bit, as long as it doesn't bend over like snap over, but just bending, it is fine. They are resilient. They would expect to bend in the wind. Now this is a good stage to try to transplant. Like I said, the earlier the better. It just barely has, the seed is just coming off, the seed leaves are coming out. The root should be small, and it's a great time to transplant. See how much roots we have already on this that just is coming out of the seed coat now. That transplants fantastically. Now, I didn't quite have it up high enough for this smaller transplant. I'm just poking underneath it a bit. Again, plants want to grow. They're very resilient. Now, a lot of people can start their seeds right in the larger peat pots. If you're going to do that, pick at least a 4-inch. The larger the better. Can start right in those pots. And that is absolutely fine. The reason why I start in a multi-pot like this is, number one, I have a limited heat mat to use. And I like to sprout the seeds that using the heat mat. It helps them move along faster so that fungus and mold and things, they don't rot out. It just gets them moving along, and I can tell what's going to sprout and what's not. So I can put them all on the heat mat. They get sprouted, because they don't need the heat mat once they are out and growing. Then they just has to be normal room temperature is fine. Except for peppers, and basil prefers a little more heat. And there may be a few more, but most of your regular vegetables don't need that heat mat after they have sprouted. Some of these I'm going to pot up in the peat pots, and I am testing out a new product. This is a 1 gallon. This is a 1 gallon pot made out of plastic, and it has holes pre-punched in it. And I'm thinking it's going to be great for the plants that I'm going to sell at the farmer's market. Inexpensive pot and easy to recycle. And for smaller transplant, peat pots are nice. But for these larger 1 gallon transplants, I think this is going to be a really good alternative. I'm going to transplant some of those peppers now. Getting up and underneath and loosening up all of that vermiculite. Again, here's a great one right here that's just coming out of its seed. It's a great size for this. Now, see, there's another one. Look at all that roots that have grown, and it's just coming out of the seed now. I'm putting my hole down in there as far as I can reach and dropping that down in. If you can, try not to coil the seed in, try not to coil that root in there. Drop it all the way down in. And tap it down just lightly. Now also, I've made this a very simple seed irrigation. It makes it easy so the seed does not get over, so it doesn't knock over that seedling, whereas a regular watering can would just knock that over or knock the soil out of the pot. I'll link to the video that shows how to make this. Very, very simple, very economical, works great. Now I'm just settling the potting soil here. I'll show you when I take this in, I'll put this in something waterproof, set it down in there with some water in it, and let this peat pot soak up that moisture. I do not want to leave this like this, even well watered. When I go inside, I want, before I walk away from this, the peat pot has to be wet as well. Now I am outside on this beautiful, beautiful day today. It's nice and it's warm. You can hear the birds singing in the background. Most people are not lucky enough to have nice weather like this to do their potting with outside, unless they have a greenhouse. Also, it is warm enough. It is up in the upper 50s, lower 60s, and it is overcast. So it's cloudy today, which is perfect for my seedlings. They're not going to get shocked by the bright sun, or the roots dry out quickly from the bright sun. So this is great. Now this is a different variety of pepper. You can see how it has the leaves are a little more obvious on this one, how they come out fatter and then come more to a point on the peppers. Whereas for the tomatoes, they're long and they're about the same length all the way down through, and then they come to a point, but they don't have that squatty area right here. That's the big difference between the peppers and the tomato plants. In case you lose your tag, which does happen. Sometimes you have mysteries. Let's get in and see. This happens to be a sweet pepper rather than the hot pepper. Let's get in here and loosen up that soil. I have, you can see really closely, I have some that have just barely starting to sprout now. Let's see what the roots look like on this little guy that is just coming out of his seed coat today. The vermiculite, it's hard to see. Let me see if I here. It is, okay. That's good. Okay. Put that right here so you can see it better. Okay. Against that dark background, this guy just germinated today. You can see how there is the root tip just coming out here. Here is the seed leaves starting to emerge from that seed coat. It's right on the edge. I'm hoping you can see this better against the black background than my hand. Remember, there's the seed coat opening up the seed leaves and that root tip coming out right now. Now the root tip will grow very, very fast. I didn't even really need to make a hole for this one, and you can transplant this now, that's fine. Just make sure that root tip is in there. And you can barely see that little guy right at the tip of my screwdriver right there. This one is a couple, oh, it's got some resistance there. Never pull against resistance. See, this is germinated just a couple days earlier than that guy. Look at all that root that's grown. These were seeded at the same time. It's just that one germinated faster than the other. And there he is. The basil seedlings. The basil seedlings are very, very tender. But you can see how stiff they are compared to the tomato and the taller tomatoes and peppers. Again, I'm just going to go underneath and loosen this up. If you take a hold of the seed leaf and you feel any resistance at all, which you might be surprised, just loosen it up some more. You do not want to pull roots away. Now, remember see how small that seedling was? Look at the size of that root all the way down in there. As soon as you start seeing leaves on top, that means that there is roots, lots of roots underneath. See how I tamped that down and I've got a little bit of a lip there? I want that lip to go away because it will dry out my peat pot. And it'll dry it out quickly. Get that all the way to the top. Now, if you got busy and you didn't get a chance to transplant your plants before they got too long and too leggy, I would recommend you take the pot and you take some scissors and snip off all of them but one. And I know it breaks your heart to do that, but then you can leave it in the container that you have. Because if you pull out the other ones, you're damaging roots to everybody else. There's too many roots in there. You're going to damage things. Save one, start some more seed. But that way you can save the one. Snip off all the ones that are too tall. Now you can see why we use seed starting mix, or I like to use vermiculite for this because it is so light and fluffy and airy, and it's not packed down at all. You can get these out really quickly, really well, really easily, and the roots grow really well here. Look at those roots. And they're being transplanted into regular potting soil. This is not a seed starting mix. It doesn't have the texture of it. It doesn't need it because it's already sprouted. It's ready to grow on now. So that's why you start in a seed starting mix, so it's easy to transplant. You know that you have a fine texture so that it's not going to smother the seeds. They won't have any trouble getting out. It holds a lot more moisture than regular potting soil does for when you start them. But when you transplant them, regular potting mix. No. When you transplant these, put them into regular potting soil, not a garden soil, not a topsoil, not just regular garden soil out of your bed. There's too many microorganisms in there that will just take them out, especially in a pot like this. Things that you self-seed in the ground, you self-seed more, so you are sacrificing some of those seeds, and that's okay because you save all this transplanting business. But if you're going to put all the time and the money and the work into transplanting and seeding all of these individual plants, you want to make sure none of them get taken out by mold or mildew or rot. That's why we take a little extra care. Also, when you have it up in a pot like this, soil out of your garden bed, topsoil, garden soil, even the ones that come in a bag, if it's labeled garden soil for planting in the ground, do not use that for this. It is too heavy of a soil and it will just smother those roots up in a pot. They're great for in the ground. It does not belong up in a pot. Testing the 1 gallon collapsible pots, especially if you're growing these to take into the garden, into the farmer's market, or you simply just cannot stand to have those plastic pots that take up all that space for your own transplants. And these should work very well to recycle these. They've got the holes in the bottom. Just think of it as a regular plastic pot, except it's collapsible. Also, it has the added benefit of being white on the outside. This white is going to reflect the heat so that the roots won't overheat. The roots are not used to being quite so hot. The black pots, let's say, here's the black on the inside. The black pots can tend to have your plants overheat, especially if you have a lot of sun in that area, or if you're planning on growing these in here for the whole season. I'm going to have another video that links showing these being grown in large, much larger all-season size, and see how they do. And there, the white will really make a huge difference. If you're starting off and you want that heat, and you know you're not going to be leaving it in here, turn them inside out so the black shows. Then you have some natural solar gain. And we're putting some basil in these. You can leave a little bit of a lip here, it's fine. It will not wick the moisture out like it did on the peat pots. The more time you have between, it's going to take longer to dry out, whereas if those peat pots dry out even once, you've killed off your seedlings. But these will take a long time to dry out, and there's so much soil here, you have a buffer. You can even just write right on here. Sweet basil 314. I may put a tag in to start, because I don't know how well this is going to stay on here because I haven't used it before. And so when you're doing something new, it's always good to test it with having a backup. Something else you can do, and this will save you light space under your fluorescent lights if you're doing this inside like I am, is I bought these by the case. So these are sterile. If you save your small pots from last year, unless you are only putting them in for a week or two, don't use the 6-packs. It's too small. They get root bound. You hold your plants back. The larger, the better. If you don't have much room, if you don't have many lights, just start your seeds later. It just means that they won't get on as much growth before you put them in the garden, but it will not hold them back nearly as much as if you start them early and then keep on having them cramped in what size will fit underneath your lights, or them not getting enough light at all. So start them later so they only have a little bit of growth going on. Even if it is a start on the heat pad, and straight from there you transplant into a couple individuals a week later when they've sprouted, and then in another 2 weeks they go in the garden. Just 3 weeks early makes a huge difference. Don't rush it beyond the size that you have good light for. You're so much better off with waiting and making sure you have the room that you need. I finally invested in a large rolling cart that was meant for the restaurant industry, that had movable metal shelves up and down that had the slats on them. You've seen it in the video of when I was seeding. I'll link to that in the show notes. And also the lights. 2 banks of 4-foot fluorescent shop lights per each level. That is enough for you to be able to put these on here lengthwise, and you can fit a lot in there. But don't skimp on the lights. So this is a good quality potting soil. This is a Pro Mix. It is something that the commercial growers use. I happen to have access to it. You can usually I'll find some sources for you to link down in the description below. This is a flexible mix. They make it up special for the nursery that I grow at. It also includes a fungicide, and it has mycorrhizae in there. Fungicide specific to the damping off diseases, and a mycorrhizae which help those roots grow. You can add your own mycorrhizae from a small packet to whatever potting soil you have. So don't feel like you have to get the mycorrhizae in the potting soil. You can use the potting soil that you have. You can buy the mycorrhizae separate. Again, I'll link to that down below. And you can add it to your potting soil. Now you see how I have a little bit of a lip here? That's okay. Since this is made out of plastic, I have no concerns over the plastic is not going to wick the soil moisture away. It's not going to dry that out. Now here is one that sprouted earlier. You can almost see the true leaves starting to form in the very center of those seed leaves. Just barely. In a couple days, those will show nicely. Now this size plastic container is called an 1801. Now those numbers are very important. You can consider it a secret code of growers of how to find out what size pot you have. Everything is based on the standard size flat. These are the flats. Okay, so the first number, the 18, refers to there are 18 individual cells in this flat. The 1801, the 01 means of that cell, the individual cells that break apart because they're pre-perforated, there's 1 plant per cell. Now, that's opposed to the 6-packs. They would have a 806, which means that 8 of those 6-packs fit in a flat, and it breaks off in cells of 6. So that is the secret code for cell pack size. Now this one here, I'm not going to transplant because it is a casualty. See how the head of that, it got snapped off? That's not going to grow. It has nice roots on it, but that snapping right there, not going to grow. That's okay. It was 1 seed. You get hundreds. Now the hard part is seeing, are there any more left in here that I'm not seeing? And there might be. So I am actually going to gently put this back in on the heat in with the rest of the seeds and see if any more seeds sprout. Sometimes they do. Don't give up on them. You want them transplanted out of here well before the true leaves get started. Look at those roots. Look at those roots. Look at all those roots. Now, when a plant reaches, the roots grow big enough that they reach the edges of the pots, they reach a barrier, that is a signal to the plant that it needs to start growing in a different direction. Sometimes it will stop root growth in a seedling and start putting up its leaf growths because it says, this is as much roots as I can get. Let me start the tops off right now. That's another reason why you should transplant these as soon as possible. Now this one's interesting. I have almost no root on here. I do have a root started. It didn't break off. I'm going to put that back in the seed here because it's going to go back on the heat, and we'll see what happens. It may have just germinated and got its top going. Now the same thing will happen if you start your plants too early and the largest pot you have them in, if it reaches the edges of those pots and the roots start going around and around, that will signal the plant to move from vegetative growth, which is what it's doing now, into reproductive growth. So it will start to flower and start trying to put on seed, because what the plant is trying to do, what its whole purpose in life for, is to flower, have fruit, and those fruits have the seed so that that plant can continue into the future. That is all it is trying to do. That is its whole purpose in life. So if it is growing, if you find a transplant in a little 6-pack that has a flower started on it, avoid that one. It means it has moved away from vegetative growth, moved into reproductive growth, and it will not ever be as big and as lovely as it could be. I have one cell left over there. I'm just actually going to go ahead, put this in here, and see what happens. Being this is basil, I'm going to get that back on the heat anyway, so we'll give it a go. Use the sprinkler to make sure these are settled down in around the roots. You don't want any air pockets, large air pockets in there. Remember, when you put these in, press them down gently around the roots. You don't want to squeeze it down and make concrete in there. You want little micro pockets of air, but not the big pockets. Okay. Now, larger seeds can be started in this straight potting mix straight. I wouldn't start small things like basil, thyme, a lot of the herb seeds. The tomatoes and peppers even could be started in here, but if you start in the regular potting mix, you need to plant no more than 2 seeds per cell, and know that you're going to be cutting away, not pulling, but cutting away the weaker of the 2. And you have room for this on your heat mat. Now this is a Roma tomato as opposed to the other one I'd started. They're a little leggy. Yes, I should have transplanted them earlier when they were just this little. But it is what it is. They'll do fine. Better transplanted earlier. But plants want to grow. Now, when 2 seedlings are up close to each other like this, I had 2 seeds that sprouted right next to each other. What you should do is snip one of them off. I can't bear to do that. Since I have such light vermiculite, I'm going to try to gently tease them apart. So this one has the majority of the roots. That one I know is going to be all set. This guy, maybe. I'm an optimist. Remember, if you start feeling any resistance at all when you're pulling on these, give it a little tap to break up that soil. If you used anything else besides either potting mix or vermiculite, you have a hard time transplanting. I've never started seeds in perlite, which is the white light, because it doesn't hold any water. Like this here is perlite, the white bits in the potting soil here. This is perlite. You can buy straight perlite, but I've never tried that for seed starting. It does not make any sense to me because it doesn't hold the moisture you need for the new seedling. Go straight for the vermiculite. Vermiculite is also used as an insulator, so make sure it is horticultural vermiculite so that there's no possibilities of contamination of anything that you don't want in there that they might have added to the house insulation. I'm not positive they add anything, but I don't want to take the chance. I get these tags by the roll because I start so many seeds, but you can use popsicle sticks. You can take a white gallon milk jug and cut them up into just sections and write on them. You can take sticks. I mean, be creative. Use whatever you have. Recycle something. I have used the white milk jugs a lot. Just I really didn't want to take the time this year to do that. But that's a great recycling project. Now it's good to try to get the same type of plant complete on a flat like this. First glance you might think, let me put some extra peppers in here, because if you lose a tag you can tell later whether it's a tomato or a pepper. However, it would be difficult to keep half of this on the heat and half of it not. Keep it all tomato. Keep it all to the same sort of growing conditions that you're going to want, because you want the lights right down, almost touching those plants. And then keep an eye on them, because as they need them, you just raise it up. But you want them right down there. Up here, you're cutting down the amount of light you're getting by half. Get them right down here, and then raise them up as you need to. Another great tip to keep your seedlings healthy and for them to be stocky is you can put a small fan. I use one of those oscillating circular fans with a stand, and have it on low and just a little bit in the distance, and have it oscillating back and forth over the seedlings, just enough so that it blows and just rumples that. They just sway in the breeze a little bit. You don't want a strong breeze. There's no need for that. Just a little bit of a breeze. And that helps keep the very surface not so wet, so that you're having damping off fungus is being reduced. It slows down the growth of the tops. And yes, the slowing down is a good thing because it makes it stocky. It makes them rugged and not flimsy. They're not going to be flopping over on you when you transplant them. It makes for good, hardy transplants. The seed leaves have not popped out of that seed coat yet, but look at the roots that are down there already. Seeds and seedlings do not need any fertilizer until they put out their first true leaves. Every bit of nutrition that they need, they get packed in with their seed that they're in. So even now, I'm not adding any fertilizer yet, because every leaf that you see here is just a seed leaf. Wait for the true leaves before you start fertilizing, and then only do it gently. Maybe about half or a quarter strength fertilizer of whatever fertilizer you're using, whether it be an organic or a conventional fertilizer. Just water it down. It needs to be a fertilizer that mixes with water and then is applied. Not a granular fertilizer that you apply to the soil, something, or mix in with the soil. Not an osmocote won't help you yet. It has to be something you mix with water. It can be a fish emulsion, but again, whatever concentration it tells you to use generally, unless it specifically gives you seedling instructions for that fertilizer, water it down. If you see yellowing of your seed leaves, something else is going on. It's not fertilizer. It could be they're staying too wet, and so it's completely rotted the root away, and it's just finished. It could be it's not getting enough light. Now that is the most common. It seems like there's a lot of light for it to you because you can see it. Usually the lights are way up, a foot or more above, and you can see them, but it's just not strong enough for those seeds. Get that lights right down, almost touching the leaves. So it completely depends upon how warm you're keeping these and the amount of light, for how long they will be able to hold until they go out in this size container. The warmer they are, the faster they're going to grow. Remembering peppers have to have some heat or they're going to languish. Basil has to have some heat or they're going to languish. But other than that, plan on them only spending a couple of weeks in here, even with this transplanted down so small like this. I'm going to put mine out early. I'm going to use a couple different methods to make sure they don't get hit by frost. I'll cover those in another video, and we'll see how they all work. There's some I've used before that I really enjoy, but we'll see. Huh? Nope, everybody's okay. Down in here, you can see one right on this corner that just germinated. And you can see how there's a root all the way down through. So it just germinated. That's all you saw up top. And look at the root all the way down through here. Again, I have a cloudy day today. And it is moist because it just rained this morning, so there's some humidity. It's a great time to be out transplanting these. If it was full sun, I would not transplant these out in the full sun. They can dry out those roots in just a second. Look at the roots on that. It never ceases to amaze me. I would have transplanted all of these into the larger pots, but I simply don't have enough grow lights to support that space. So you just do what you can with the primary thought is, do you have enough light? You can transplant your plants into the largest container that you can, as long as you can support the lights above them. Here's one that's not labeled. That was a, see now even, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that was a California Wonder because I labeled the rest. I am going to put a question mark on it. I was too busy talking and I didn't get labeling. I'm going to leave these in the sink to soak for the next hour, and then I'll move these pots into a flat that does not have holes in the bottom so that I can keep just a tiny bit of water there. Another good way to deal with this is if you have one of those, you put a wicking mat underneath these while they're sitting. Is perfect because it always keeps just the peat pot slightly damp. At the end of the season, I will post a video of showing how plants growing in a pot. Some will be in topsoil, some will be in some potting soils, some will be in the garden soils, to compare the differences in them. If you found this helpful, please click like and subscribe. It really helps me to know that I'm helping people with some of their gardening projects. I would love to hear from you. We'll see you again.